This is the Powered Up Podcast, show number 2.
When you stand in front of the class on that first day of school and you say, "Hi, my name is Mr. Creed, and I'm going to be your second grade teacher," you've become the answer to a trivia question to their life for the rest of their life. You will always be their second grade teacher. That's what it is.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt. I need some branding Rogers. Matt, what's new?
Oh man, things are good. Things are really good. We're going about this education thing. Whenever you're listening at it to the podcast, I'm sure you'll get that statement, because education is always ever changing. Right now, we're in that world of, are we virtual? Are we in person? And what does life look like? But things are really good. It's nice to be with kids and making a difference. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit in our episode today.
Absolutely. It's definitely an interesting time. What I'm enjoying right now working with teachers is we're doing things, especially from an instructional technology standpoint, of doing things that potentially are helping us survive instruction right now, but having conversations with teachers of, just take 10 seconds to reflect on, was that good? Was that valuable? Do I want to do that again next year? Because eventually we're going to get back to the point where we have the choice of using technology or not. And I'm excited to get to the healthy balance where teachers can look at what they've done and what they haven't done and how they can make those decisions from an instructional standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think the digital competency is great for a position of coach, because whether you wanted to or not, everyone was thrust in this position. And so at this point, I'm not only just surviving, but I'm trying to thrive in that position. So. Absolutely.
So our interview, we have Mr. Mike Creed with us today, and Matt and I just finished that up. We met Mike 5 years ago at the Keystone Technology Innovator Summit, where Matt and I actually met as well. And I've always had a lot of respect for him. He's an excellent teacher. I have a lot of respect for him as a father, as a friend. And I was excited to interview him, and boy, oh boy, did this interview not disappoint at all. He was incredible. He had so many great things for us to think about, things that were making me say, man, I wish I could go back 5 years, 8 years, and just say one thing different, just to approach everything I did with a different lens. And not only the emotional standpoint, the classroom culture, but some great instructional takeaways as well. Matt, is there anything that, without giving too much away, is there anything that you want to hit on that you think will be exciting for our listeners and our viewers to hear and see before we jump into the interview?
Well, I think, first off, Mike's an incredible human being, as you were mentioning. We've always, Ken and I, through our ventures together, always talk about Mike and just as an inspiration, and getting to hear a little bit more about legacy and what he really created in relatively short amount of time in the classroom is just pretty incredible. And it just really proves to you the power that you have in the classroom. And when you get to hear some of his key points, I know it's a little bit longer of our interview, and we haven't done any interviews besides Mike at this point, but um, it's going to be a hard one to top because there are just a lot of gems in there that recenter you regardless of where you are in education, whether you are new, whether you are kind of feeling the push, the burnout, if you've been doing this a long time, if you're close to retirement. I couldn't help but leave that conversation and recognize, man, I'm ready to go and attack tomorrow and make it a pretty awesome day. So I think we're hoping that you have that same feeling after listening to the episode.
Absolutely. It is a long one that you can see, looking at the bottom right hand corner to see how long this episode is, but it's so worth it. So without any further ado, let's jump into that interview with Mike Creed. All right, Mike, welcome to the podcast. I would love to say as our first guest, but we got to see how this interview goes or not. I'm not sure if you'll actually be our first guest or if we're gonna wait a couple months to launch this episode. But how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me, guys. I can't wait to hear this in June. By the time you run out of other guests to put me on, the Christmas decorations behind me aren't going to make any sense at that point.
Yeah, that could be a problem. So you've had a really interesting journey over the years of your teaching career. So for our audience to get to know you a little bit better, why don't you just talk about, how it all started for you, where you started in teaching and the experiences that you've had in your career.
So I started actually at a preschool. So I have my early childhood associate's degree. I was a non-traditional student. I'm from Delaware originally. I went to Delaware Technical Community College. I got my 2-year degree in 4 years, so I was pretty much right on track, I think. And I, while I was there, I kind of was going at sports medicine first, to be honest with you. And it turned into, you know what? I think this would be fun. Let's go for it. And while I was there, I was hired. You had to do lessons down in their accredited childcare. And when I was there, I was hired as right while I was still taking classes there. I would go down during my breaks and I would work for 2 hours. I would come back to class and I would go to class and I'd go back and forth. So I did that for a little while. I got my 2-year degree. I moved up to Pennsylvania where I worked as a 3-year-old teacher at a chain preschool. I worked my way up to assistant principal of that chain in that location. And my wife, who is also a teacher, she was teaching at that point. She was teaching at a high school, music teacher, and she was home for the summers. She was able to do a lot more freedom. I was working and working at the preschool and going back and forth and just all sorts of things. Working late hours, picking up for other people who weren't able to be there. And I said, I can't do this anymore. So I quit. And a week later, found out that we were going to have a baby. Went back to school full time. Worked at a hydraulic factory while I was going back to school full time. Got from student teaching, I was hired right from student teaching right into a classroom there. The principal hired me from my student teaching. I had her come in and observe me. I asked her to come in and observe me. She came in. She said, when do you get your certificate? And I was a December graduate. And I said, I think it comes in February. And so by the time all the paperwork and all that stuff. And so I think it was Valentine's Day that I started second grade in the same building that I had taught fifth grade in earlier as a student teacher. And that was only for a few weeks. And then they moved me to fourth grade. There were a lot of pregnancies that year. So I finished out the year in fourth grade. So in the same year, I had 3 different classroom positions at 3 different grade levels. And then from there, I was interviewed by that principal's husband for a position. And he hired me as a long-term sub for first grade. So I did that. And then while I was there, I got observed by another principal and was hired as a second grade teacher.
I actually want to stop you right there for a second because your journey in second grade is something I want to dive into a lot of detail about. But what I want to highlight about the story you've told so far is the grit and the resilience and the willpower that you showed to be where you are today. And I think that's a powerful message for our pre-service, our new teachers to hear, and even our veteran teachers to kind of remember that time where they were probably in a similar situation. Me personally, I did a full year of subbing. I was dropping resumes off in person. I did a lot to try to get in front of people. And even if your lesson wasn't perfect, it was about reaching out to these people, asking them to come watch you, asking them for feedback. And I think that had a big part of you finding early success in really landing a job there, which I is just so important. And I applaud you for what you've told us so far.
Well, and just to kind of jump in here, I think so. Creed, you and I have a similar kind of route, and I think I talked about this in my launch. But I got hired from student teaching from that same mentality of I was at a high school placement at the same district I'm at now. I invited the principal in and the assistant principal. Both came and observed me during the time I was there. I actually reached out to the kind of assistant to the superintendent and the superintendent. And the superintendent never was able to make it down to the observation, but the assistant did. And it was that same type thing. Like, it wasn't that I was confident in my own abilities. I just knew that at that time, it would be great for me to tap into that resource of someone who really has great perspective. And what I've learned years afterwards, and I'm sure you can speak to this, is administrators see a ridiculous number of resumes. And so when something like that sticks out, it doesn't even matter if it was a good observation or not. Your name is in their head that they will consistently come back to, because even if you had bombed your observation, the fact that you were not necessarily courageous enough, that might be the kind enough way to say it, but the fact that you just put yourself out there and said, hey, I want feedback. I'd love to have a conversation about education with you. I recognize I may not have all the answers, but I think, Creed, what you're saying there is over and over and over again, hey, at the end of it, what to add on to Ken's thing, new teachers, pre-season, pre-service teachers, I'd add, if you're not tenured yet, up to that 3-year window where realistically you need to build that confidence of having an administrator, because what happens is you have 5x5s, which you'll learn about at some point, where it's just 5-minute little chunks and you get 5 notes of feedback while you're in there. And it may not be a formal observation, but those type activities, you need to recognize or create a sense of normalcy as soon as possible. So I guess, what was your perspective before jumping into deeper into our where we met? What was kind of, was it feedback you got from advisors, or was one of those things that you knew point A to point B to get a job, these people are really important and I need to be in front of them?
The people who observe you for student teaching, they don't hire teachers. And so that was kind of my big thing, is that I sort of put it together was, wait, that person who's in front of me as a college professor, they haven't been in the classroom in years. They haven't been connected to a public school possibly in years. Like, they still have friends, but it's not the same. And when I was sitting there and I was doing my 5th grade lessons when I was a student teacher, the principal, she would come in from time to time. And I knew her from, she had worked with my wife prior to that. And like, I just kind of gave a shy little wave, and I came home and I said, I should get her just to watch me. I don't know. I've never taught 5th grade. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's figure this out. And I mean, it was the scariest thing ever, was to say, as a student teacher, and also because I was a non-traditional. So there was a lot on that observation. I mean, there was, I quit my job to go work and make, $8 an hour at this hydraulic factory and go back to school. It was kind of all on that observation. And it was one of those, oh, okay. And I'm not even going to lie, I still have in my basement the magic oven, which is what I did that day for that lesson. It's a cardboard box that I made out of a diaper box and a leaf blower box. And I use it every chance I get with the class. Even now, I hope to do the magic oven this year. If you're allowed to be near an oven, I don't know what you're allowed to be near anymore. But so that observation was a big thing for me. And it was one of those deals where when I did it, I mean, I pulled out every bell and whistle that I could think of for that lesson. It was like, we're going to do this because I want to be successful in this, and the only way to do that is to get my name out there. The only way to do it is for them to say, like you guys said, I want to make it where, look, I didn't have the best high school GPA. All right, I had a college GPA that was pretty good, but that's because I had a little bit different perspective. I was the one paying for the classes, and again, all my eggs were in that basket. There was no, well, it's okay, I'll do it next year. Like, no, I can't make $8 an hour anymore. I need to be able to provide for my family. And so by doing that observation, it was let's go for it. And I got observed. And what's funny is, so continuing on the kind of the track that I was on, so that principal, I got an interview with her husband. Her husband hired me. And when I was there as his long-term sub, I thought, oh, cool. I'll hopefully be able to get into this district. While I was there, I get a message that they're closing 2 schools in the district. And so it turned into, oh yeah, I can get a job here too. Wait, what? And the teachers actually had on the table in the lunchroom, and I'll never forget the cold sweats every day from this, but they had a list of all the open positions in the district that they had mapped out for this. There was 2 very small community buildings, and they were going to be adding on to buildings and all these different things. And every day I would go in at lunch, and they would have the jobs crossed off for people that were reassigned to these new jobs. And one day they just looked at me and they said, hey, newbie, I don't think there's a position for you. And like my heart just sank. I was like, oh, dear God, really? Okay. And I'm grinning. Okay, we got this. And I said to the principal, because he was going to be moving from one building, one of the closing buildings. He was actually principal at both of the closing buildings. They were that small of a community schools that he worked. He was the principal of both buildings. And I said, do you have an opening? He said, I don't. He said, but go get observed by another principal. He said, I'll connect you with somebody. And that principal came in. She observed me, and she hired me to be the second grade teacher there. And so that, then that turned into a STEM position for what was called Discovery, which was a K-5 STEM position.
What a journey. It's it definitely brings back memories for me, and I'm sure Matt and many of our teachers. And if you're getting into teaching or you're still in that process, take notes. Take notes on the process that Mike used. And it's important that you're working extremely hard. It's important that you're delivering effective lessons and, setting up excellent classroom culture and management systems. But the process of getting in front of people is so important. And depending on how your district operates and what that process looks like, I'm sure people are observing you. That's part of the job. But your willingness to invite others in and to ask for that feedback is so important. And, it doesn't just have to be the principals. Think about other decision makers or other people that influence decision makers and other people that can support you. If your district has instructional coaches, bring them into your room to help you, to give you feedback, to provide you with some insight or suggestions. Because not only is that going to help you improve, but those people do talk to administrators. So it's a really valuable lesson to learn as to how we can, crack into those positions. So you referenced a couple jobs that you had there, but I really want to dive deep into second grade. So tell us what your journey looked like when you started with second grade.
I taught second grade for 3 years. And when I started, I was the only male. No, there was a fifth grade teacher that was a male. So I was the first, the youngest male teacher as far as grade levels go that they would be hitting. And so I went in and thought, okay, like what do we do? And I walked into a room and it was completely empty. I mean, the room was, because it was hey, here's your classroom. And I walked in and thought, holy cow. And I spent the time that summer thinking about it, because you kind of don't, I've come to think about it more and more, but when you stand in front of the class on that first day of school and you say, hi, my name is Mr. Creed, and I'm going to be your second grade teacher, you've become the answer to a trivia question to their life for the rest of their life. You will always be their second grade teacher. That's what it is. And so when I stand in front of a class and I say, hi guys, my name is Mr. Creed. I'm going to be your second grade teacher. Right there from then on, when they meet somebody at a bar years from now and they say, oh, what school did you go to? Oh yeah, what about this and that? And they say, who was your second grade teacher? You are the answer to that trivia question. And so that becomes a thing that I took very, very seriously was, well, I had teachers that sucked. Like I don't ever want to be the answer to who was the worst teacher you ever had. Because we all have that worst teacher. It was Mrs. Porter. She was 1,000 years old. She was my third grade teacher. She was the worst teacher that I ever had. She's one of the reasons that I'm a teacher now is because she was the worst teacher that I ever had. I am not a teacher because of the best teachers that I ever had. I'm a teacher because of the worst teachers that I ever had. And when I went in there, I thought, okay, cool. I still struggle. And I'll tell you right now, I struggle with math. I don't know my multiplication tables right now as an adult. I do not know my multiplication tables. I have a very difficult time reading and comprehending. Very, very difficult time with that. And so when different things happen, I thought, well, I can't give all the kids all the same stuff because they're not all the same kid. I was that kid in the back who didn't raise their hand. So I need to make sure that kid is getting this. So that very first year I went through and I was like, okay, we're going to do it this way. I mean, I got to school every day at 5:30 in the morning, and I lived an hour away. So I got to school every day at 5:30 in the morning. I would work, plan everything out. I'm at the copier making copies. Okay, I got all this stuff. And the very first year, I loved it, and I had a lot of fun with the students. And I Creed's Crew was born that first year, and so that became a thing. And then that year we had I had 4 iPads that they allowed me to get my hands on. And I actually borrowed them from a neighbor's class who was like, oh, I'm a pilot. I have 8 of these iPads. I was like, can I borrow like 4 of them just to try? Like, I just want to try stuff. And so I started pushing buttons. Like, what does this do? How do we do that? Hey, kids, can we try this? And I gave it to the students. And then I said to the principals at the end of the year, she's talking to me and she said, what are you looking forward to next year? I was like, I want more iPads. And she goes, yeah, okay. I was like, no, I want a whole class of iPads. She goes, yeah, right. We're never going to be able to get that. I said, okay. Get an email about halfway through the summer. Our homeschool association bought 2 carts of iPads. So now we had 3 in the building. One that was this pilot program and 2 that were going to sit in the library. We got the email. I went down the next day. I drove the hour to school. It was in the middle of the summer. And I went into the library and I took the iPads and I pushed them down to my room. And I pretty much put a bike lock on it and said, they're mine. And she said, Creed, you can't take them.
One thing that I want to hit on real quick that you talked about was you said you wanted the kids to do different things. And I love that. It wasn't differentiation that you said my kids need. It was more basic in the sense of the terminology because it was what you saw was important for their success and what was best for them. And although you were doing differentiation, it wasn't about the fancy terms. It was about what do my kids need to be the best that they can be. And, for me, it was kind of similar. I used station rotation from day one in math in my career. And 5 years later, I had someone telling me about the daily 3 model that they were going to roll out. And I realized I'd been doing daily 3 for 5 years. Never heard of it before. But you thought, what is best for my kids and how do I do that? And you executed on it. But the iPad specifically, what was it about the iPad that hooked you from the beginning and again fed into that mindset of this is going to be best for my students?
I've always been a button pusher, not just, push my wife's buttons, but, I've always been sort of that when I get a new piece of tech, I'm like, ooh, what can I break and how can I fix it? And I kind of looked at it at that point and thought, man, you can't order a hoagie without touching a screen. Like I can't go into Wawa and get a hoagie without touching a screen. I want these kids to be interactive with these things. I also want this to fit them. I don't want it to be, like you said, just a screen time. I wanted it to be, all right, I have this tool. And with those 4 iPads, I was able to say, okay, cool. Like I got I can give this to this kid and this one to this kid and this one to this kid. And this was before Google Classroom. This was before Google Docs on the iPads. This was before all these things. And it was like, wow, look, we got stuff. And they're not just it's not a toy, it's a tool. Like that was always one of those early things I wanted to hit early was we're going to take this thing from a toy that your mom gives you when we're waiting for the waitress to come to the table. We're going to turn it into a tool, and we're going to be showing our parents what to do. Like my students knew the 26-character Wi-Fi password for the district because they needed to. And so when I saw the opportunity to get these iPads, I was like, wow. So you're telling me because it was a cart of 30. I was like, wait, you're telling me I could have an iPad for every kid. I can make their day fit them. How? Okay, let me do that. And so I just sat down. I remember I had all 30 iPads on the table and going through. And, when you get into that rhythm of which buttons to push in the right order so you don't even have to look at them anymore, I had everything updated and downloaded and all this stuff. And I went, okay, I think this is going to work. And we went about it. And I always told the students, I was like, look, it's not that we're doing things that aren't second grade ideas. We're just doing it different. I never look at something and say, oh yeah, let's do it the way everybody does it. Like I've never done it the way everybody does it because I can't. I don't have the ability to. Like I said, I have to work really hard to do things because I can't. And so I have to look at it and say, okay, what can I do to help this student? Here's this device. Here's what I'm going to give you your prescription. Here's your prescription for what I think you need today for reading. Here it is. And it turned into reading grids and math grids and just creating all of these different things. And every day I would go in, and I've used this, I use this a lot, but every day when I went in, I got there, early in the morning. I'd plan my entire day out, and then I would let go of the handlebars as soon as the bell rang. To me, planning the way I plan is like riding a bike with no hands. You do all the work before you let go of the handlebars. And once you let go of the handlebars, that doesn't mean that you stop steering. That doesn't mean that you can't grab the handlebars if you're going to fall over. It also doesn't mean that you're not going to fall flat on your face sometimes. But I can move my weight a little bit and I can keep the bike up. I can pedal a little bit and keep the bike moving. But as soon as that bell rings, it's, okay, let's see if it works. And honestly, I started off that second year. I threw everything away that I did the first year. Because I sort of made this as everybody's going to learn math at the same time in the same lesson and all this stuff. And I said, nope, that doesn't work. I threw everything away. And I said, I'm starting over day one. And I still to this day, I create my lessons when I walk in. I have an idea. I've got a plan. I know where we're going. But I have to look at data. I've got to look at where we are, what they did the day before, how it went, what feedback I got from the students and say, oh, okay, let me change this. Let me do this. Or let me tweak this. And so the iPads really gave me that ability. And it just turned into where, I would take my students to do presentations we did virtual presentations at places. And I was like, hey, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. My name's just, I'm Creed's crew. I'm just the first part of it. They're the ones who are doing all the work. They're the ones who are doing all these things. I'm just the guy that gets to hang out with them during the day. And so that was
I love how you use this tool to further enhance the experience that you were trying to create, that different experience for students. The way you described lesson planning, I can absolutely relate to. It was always about this person's going to do this person's going to do this, kind of like you said earlier, here's your prescription. And it just goes to show that when you have the goal of your classroom in mind, the planning process can fall into that. And the way you described about letting the handlebars go, you're not giving up control. You have possibly better control because you've strategically designed the day and you're using your tools to really accomplish that goal. And you did it really effectively. Matt, I want to turn it to you because you were a very early adopter of the iPad, your district being one-to-one very, very early in comparison to most districts in our state. So, how can you relate to what Mike has been saying about the use of the iPad and how it fell into your classroom as well?
Well, I'll go through. I have a list of things that I want to bring up. Of I was just kind of sitting back and processing, which is not good for me. And let me share these things because I think they all relate to what you're asking, Ken. Creed, unfortunately, you and I are poisoned with the same dysfunction, I think, of how we operate in a classroom. And I want to kind of we'll touch on a few things, but the first thing that I think that you created, Creed, that is something that I have learned from you, or we just kind of developed together, is this idea of classroom culture. And I know that you've branded that bicycling. I know that you have it as a sticker or an item as part of Creed's crew. Creed's crew
Show
is
us the sticker.
yeah, well, Creed's crew is a legit thing. I actually have a cousin of mine who I was at a family gathering, happened to ask where they went to school, asked if they knew Creed. They were part of Creed's crew. I'm in the middle of a Christmas party calling Creed so a now seventh grader can talk to Creed because they haven't been able to talk to him in years. When you talk about that idea of a second grade teacher, that definitely is not the worst teacher they reflect on, right? It is by all means the highlight because of the preparation and the experience that you provide. And jumping into that aspect is all about the culture you create. It is all about that. And so when you take those steps, right? Obviously, it's not even a confidence. I don't think really successful people don't believe that they're really successful. I think that's a concept that often is the case. I don't find myself successful or talented. I just work hard at what I do. And I think the two guys in this interview are the exact same way. They work harder than a lot of people I know. And so that comes down as the production of release all of the safety and only monitor to make sure the navigation. You are the rudder of the boat to make sure it's heading where you need to go. And I wish that I had, maybe going into the iPad conversation, a little bit of your foresight. Now, I will say I had iPads in my classroom before you did. The iPad came out in, I think it was like March, and I had one in the beginning of April. Now, at that point, I taught special ed, and they could get away with special ed funding as a assistive technology. The problem is the iPad at that point had it was like an old school iMac, but maybe beforehand. Like you could type on it, you could technically research, like use Safari, but email wasn't even really a thing you would use until, I don't know, 2-3 years later, when LMSs started to pave the way for what I see Apple and Chromebooks actually considering education as a reasonable element. I say this way too often that the first 2 years when I'd have people come in and be like, "Oh, you have iPads, what are you using them for?" Well, the kids are learning physics through Angry Birds. Like, it's a really tough sell for a $600 device, right? But at that point, it was so difficult, at least in a special ed environment where I had kids for 30 minutes, to say justifiably, we're going to use these devices. Now, what I will tell you is, as you added other features and it actually resembled an educational device, same type thing. The idea of kids being in that driver's seat. I make no decisions in my classroom on how kids present their learning. Absolutely zero, right? At the beginning of the first 2 weeks of school, I teach them every app that I have chosen for them to have on their iPad, even if they've used it since kindergarten on or possibly before. I teach them all the different possibilities, and I say, you know what, this is your time to prove your learning. But it took a long way to get to that point. And it took the idea, do I like rubrics? Do I not like rubrics? Rubrics, in the traditional sense, turned into the same product over and over again. So that whole self-exploration, you have the technology, and what's the technology providing? At first, when I first had them, way early on, not much. But when they were thrust into your room, and maybe not an early adopter, you're definitely an early adopter for your district, but there were systems that made it reasonable to use. But I look back to answer truly your question, Ken, I look back at the initial getting iPads like the first year of school. I know I tried hard, I worked hard, but I am so embarrassed at what I thought was reasonable. But at that point, the iPad didn't work for the time that I had kids.
I definitely want to circle back to the Creed's Crew brand that you built in your classroom, but let's first continue along with your career journey. So you were in second grade for a few years, and then what was the next opportunity that presented itself to you, and tell us about that part.
Yeah. So then from this from second grade and the whole Creed's Crew thing and having the class for 3 years. During my third year, there was a job that got put out in our district, and it said 21st Century Problem Solving Special. And I've shared the paragraph before that it had the job description, and you could have 100 people read it, and you'd have 100 different ways of looking at what the position could be. And when it came up, I thought, yeah, I want to do this. Okay. And the principal, she talked to me, and she's like, you should probably apply. And I was like, all right, sounds good. So I applied for the position, and I did get it. And so I was in the first group of teachers in my district to create this special. There were 5 of us that were for 5 different buildings. There was a K-5 special, and they said, hey, you guys need to come up with a curriculum, a budget, and a plan, and you've got till like Wednesday. And so 5 of us locked ourselves in a room. We had never worked together before, the 5 of us. And they are the 4 teachers that I got to work with are the 4 most amazing people that I've ever gotten a chance to work closely with. We locked ourselves in a room, and we said, okay. And what was funny was we looked at the job description, and we went, what do you think it is? And we all had different ideas of what this job description was. We're like, oh, we're going to go this route. Well, what about this? Oh, we could do that too. And so we had to come up with this creation. So we spent, I did that for 2.5 years. And that was from kindergarten. It was kindergarten to 5th grade. I saw every student in my building. So I had 600 students that came through my door over the course of a week, 40-minute special. And we did everything from learning the 4 C's. So communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, creation, however you want to put that last one. All the way to computer coding, to a basic electric unit, to fairy tale engineering, to just a general maker space, to all of these different things that we put together. And it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. We got to design our classroom spaces. I had no desk in my classroom. We did all sorts of crazy creations in that route. I mean, I would go into school with a circular saw and a screw gun and like, all right, I'm going to go build this thing. And I would be doing this with the students. Hey, I need you to hold the other end of that board because we're going to build this. And I made green screen flip top tables. I made all sorts of different things. So I was like, well, we need that. Let's go build it. All right, guys, let's figure it out. And I would build it over the course of a day. And I had 55-gallon fish tank with fish and turtles in it. We had all sorts of stuff going on. I mean, it was a fun place to be. The music was going all day. And we had a blast. We had a blast. And then but I was still traveling an hour.
Real quick, Mike, if I could, Creed's Crew, did that continue with your special and all the students that you were seeing, like when you were in second grade?
It got put on pause. We'll put it that way. It was paused. And Creed's Crew, I don't know if you guys want me to, the idea was that was my class. That's who we were. And so when so that was always a big thing for me, was to have that Creed's Crew. And honestly, the name came from calling the kids in from the playground. My neighbor class, she yelled for her class. She's like, oh, so-and-so's class, come here. And I just went, Creed's Crew, let's go. And they all came running over. And it was like the third day of school. They all came running over and lined up. And I thought, oh, that has a nice ring to it. We'll go with that. And then it became a thing. And we kind of put together rules in that first group of what it was to be a crew member and what that meant. And that one thing that is a big thing, and Matt kind of touched on it, is once a crew, always a crew. And you retire as an active crew member. That's the way it's put. And that's the way the students know it, is that, oh, I'm not an active crew member anymore. And I've got stickers, like that's a big deal. The Creed's Crew sticker, if you've got that on your laptop, that's a big deal for them. I still send them out. I have a box that I'm getting ready to send out in the next week or so to the addresses that I have. And these kids are in 10th grade, 9th grade, and 8th grade. And I still send them out stickers. And hey, here's a new, that I never changed the logo, but I add something different around it or whatever it might be. I actually have a magic oven one, speaking on the last, because I've done that so many times. I have a magic oven sticker that I have planned. But the Creed's Crew idea was just kind of one of those things where I thought, you know what, we do things different. You're a crew member. We have a different expectation. We have a different, like, we even walk the halls, and I know that some people, oh, you have your kids walk the hall in a straight line, like that's whatever. No, we want to stand out. And so, like, we do like different things. And I always would tell the students, especially when they had the iPads, was, look, we're a fishbowl. We have people all the time that have their noses pressed up against the glass on the outside of the door looking at what we're doing. Let's be the cool fish. Like, nobody goes to the aquarium to look at the minnows that are swimming in the background. Like, nobody does that. So when people come and they walk down the hallway and they want to look in, and I would have teachers that would stand out in the hallway and look in, and I'd go, hey guys, we got a group. They kind of smirk, and they knew it, and we just went about it differently. And I email, I still try to email, I text the parents, I do all those different things, and just say, hey, tell your crew member that they rock, and I'll talk to them soon. If they need anything, you let me know. And so on that, when you talked about what happened during that time when I was a discovery teacher, so on the last day that I taught second grade in that building, I read the book, Our Tree Named Steve, which at the end of the book, he's just in a different place in the yard. And so if you've never read the book, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but go ahead. And so he's in a different place in the yard. And so I read that to the students, and I cry every year on the last day of school. I will sit there and cry with my students that, man, this is, we're done, guys. Like, you guys are retired. What do we do for the next group? What does that look like? And I always tell them, you're standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before you, because they're the ones who helped me become a teacher and the type of teacher that I am. And so you guys, every day, every activity that we do, you're teaching me, hey, we can do this. Yeah, we might be 7 and 8, but watch what we can do. And so that was kind of the push there, and having that whole Creed's Crew mentality just kind of kept growing from there. So it was put on pause for a little while, the Creed's Crew thing. I took a break. I went to the discovery thing, and it's funny, when I did it, the kids were like, well, is there going to be another Creed's Crew? I don't know. I don't know. And I actually spent, because I was going to be applying for another position in my home district, because I was still traveling an hour. I was applying now in my home district where my wife teaches and my kids go to school. And I went around and I interviewed the crew members that I had, and I asked them questions. I was like, what's it mean to be a crew member? And I had kids that were crying while they were talking to me about that. And that was one of those, like, oh, okay, like, wow. That's awesome that you guys, 3 years later, as fifth graders, you're crying in front of your class talking about what it was like to be in second grade. Like, that was kind of the stuff that hit me, like, wow, all right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So then I got to go and become a coach. And so then through coaching, I got a chance to work with, I work in, there's 8 buildings in the district. I work in 5 of them in different combinations, K to 12. And then this year I got a phone call that I was going to be teaching second grade again, that they needed a long-term sub for the chunk of time. And with all the things that are going on, I believe they decided that was better to put us in a classroom than to be pulled to sub all the time and all those different things. And so they said, hey, would you teach second grade? And I was out in the yard, and I was crying after I got off the phone. I was like, I'm back. I get to do this again. Like, oh my goodness, this is, and I texted and emailed all the crew members that I had, and guys, look, I get to do this again. And I had emails and calls and all this stuff from them. And so on that first day of school, I stood up in front of them. It was online. It was a video call. because we were, virtual, and I went online and I said, "Hi guys, my name is Mr. Creed, and I'm going to be your second grade teacher." And like it, boom, hit me in the chest, and I was like, "Wow, okay, let's go." And they were so excited. They've got Creed's crew stickers. They've got that already, and they've been in contact with crew members. Like we've been in contact with retired crew members because, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. And so that whole
Hang on, I have to interrupt because what you just talked about needs to be focused on. I knew you had good classroom culture. I knew about Creed's crew, but I didn't know about Creed's crew. I didn't know that you were creating a legacy from grade level to grade level with the branding of your classroom culture. I pride myself on having strong classroom culture. I would reach out to former students by email. Usually every year at the beginning of the year, I'll email every student that I had. But the way that you connected year after year and the way you became a retired crew member, the way the students connected those years was just amazing. And although this probably has a very elementary feel right now, this is not an elementary conversation. And if you, it's about the human factor that I really like to focus on, that students are there to learn from you and to connect with you and to look up to you as a mentor. And so that feel in second grade is different than that feel in fifth grade, as well as middle school and high school. But it's about that idea of connecting with the students on a deeper level, because the curriculum comes after that, and the curriculum happens better when that's been established. But our newer teachers take notes. Our veteran teachers that are doing this, don't forget. Let this be a reminder for you, like it is for me right now, how important these ideas are of establishing classroom culture and establishing that rapport and that relationship with students. Now, I'm curious, Mike, if you could go back to your first year of Discovery, would all of those kids become crew members?
Nope, not at all. Putting it on pause meant more to me than handing 600 stickers out. Because for those kids that spent 180 days, I got to be with them for 180 school days, and we got to share the ups of, wow, guys, look, we're doing all this awesome stuff, to the downs of sitting there together when somebody's pet dies, and to have those moments where it's like, no, we're not doing math right now because this kid's cat died last night. Like, no. And so that was a thing. And I talked to the crew and said, look, guys, I don't think it's more of a special bond to have that limited edition idea rather than the, hey, we all get stickers, yay. Because it
was a 180-day journey as a crew together.
Right. There's a difference between those two things. And so I had a student that when he was in fifth grade was taking sixth grade math at the middle school. So he would our schools were right next door to each other, but he would be walked over every day to go to sixth grade math, and he would go there. And he sat down on the first day. Now, this is a fifth grader. He sat down on the first day, and he took out his Chromebook and he opened it up, and the kid next to him said, "You're a crew member too?" And I went, oh, and he came back and he's like, "Hey, I met so-and-so. They're in my math class. They told me they were a crew member too," and they pointed to their sticker. And like, no, the 600 people aren't getting a sticker. Like that to me, that kid being able to sit down and say, "Oh, you know something. We're in that club. We've got a little difference." And for them to sit there and even as the sixth grader to look at the fifth grader and not be afraid and go, "Oh, hey, how's it going? You're one of us." Like, that's one of those deals where it's like, oh, awesome. Like that made my day. That cemented to me that don't make everybody a crew member. Because that's when he was in that.
Well, and I think Yeah, I think when you come down to it, right? Like when what's interesting is right. So we have Ken on the side of the coach, right? Myself still in the classroom, but we have mutual friends that are at different levels of education at this point. And I think some of the things I know Ken was mentioning about it's a little bit different between the grade levels, but right in our elementary realm, I don't know if it's us being guys or whatever the case may be, but we traditionally are male role models. But realistically, elementary teachers are superheroes. But then you progress as you move up into heroes and mentors and guidance and steerers and maybe good cop, bad cop. But all those realms, whether it's middle school and when you have equals at 11th and 12th grades of intellectually kids feeling the same level and teachers that can view learners as realistically equals and they treat them that way with respect, that role of educator is so many different titles and they all resemble hero. Now, if I'm a mentor because it's a middle schooler, if I'm a guidance counselor part time because it's a fourth grader or something comes up, if it's a, hey, I need to be a future producer, right, in that high school, that role is an undercover sub name to it. But the thing that I really want to point at is you and watching you get emotional about being in the classroom, right? Is the hard part of making me leave the classroom, right? Like there are many joys with administration. There are many joys with coaching. There's many joys as specialists, but there's nothing like being in the classroom. And I will tell you right now, my hair is going gray, gray, gray with how this year's going. Not that any position in education is handling it differently, but I am right now the front line like you are, Creed, right? And to be in that position, but also that responsibility to rise out of difficulty and do it successfully. We went virtual for the first time last week, and the kids crushed it, absolutely crushed it. And it wasn't anything I did. Preparation, that expectations, practicing what we preach, all these different things. Didn't have a single kid miss a single assignment in a district where that is not very common, right? Showed up to every single thing because
you pedal the bike before you let
but
the
that's the
handlebars.
thing, right? It's the passion. Yeah. And we go back to whether it's standardized testing. My kids don't score well normally, right? The year they come to me, I don't care because when it sits down in March and April, those kids will literally run through walls, even if they can't sit down in a seat for the 2 weeks because they know how miserable I am to make them do it. But they know it matters to Mr. Rogers, right? It matters because I'm a crew member and I'm going to give it the best shot because I'm obligated. I care about my teacher. I care about him and he wants me to do the best I can. Heck, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And it might be a simple Dibbles assessment to prove how much reading fluency growth we've made this year. But that core component cannot be instructed or emphasized nearly enough. Like you were saying, we can dive through maps, right? The three of us could sit here and talk curriculum till our faces are blue. We've been in education long enough. It's probably not my natural conversation, like your multiplication, right? Like your reading and comprehension. It's not my strength. My strength is hands-on creating engaging learning and creating opportunities where kids can prove, hey, am I going to put the effort in or not? Because that's really the question. Are my kids going to put the effort in to show that determination, show that grit? It'll take kids way further on those kind of time milestone measures than did I cover every assessment anchor
I agree,
in
Matt,
SAS.
and I don't know that I could say we're sharing anything new in terms of classroom culture matters. You know, the way that Mike is approaching it and the branding, that's definitely an idea that I don't think many will have heard before, myself included. But, you know, this idea of classroom culture is not new. And it's just important for us to hear and remember, to be reminded, and to remind our colleagues that it does have an impact, not just on how the students feel that day, not just how much they're going to enjoy your class, but it increases engagement and it does have a direct impact on their academic success. And that's why it's so important to focus on, because it hits the whole child with that positive classroom culture.
Oh, trust me, I would love to take a day off and not have to worry about subplans. There are positions in my district that, you know what, that luxury, the idea of taking not even the assignment, but to spell it how I would say it, that the kids would respond, is painstaking. But I know that any position in education doesn't have the connection with kids that you're talking about, Creed. And it's so cool to see right now your ignition completely on fire. You are so reunited with your purpose. And we talk every once in a while, but to see it on social media, to see it as, you know what, I used to get really frustrated by this and I love seeing it again, right? It is one of those things that in teaching, getting burnout is a legit, realistic possibility, but it's not something to give up on. It's okay, maybe we shift to something, a different grade level. I think, Creed, you have every grade level with experience, so maybe you can give feedback of what's your favorite, but changing is totally fine, but to lose that passion, just you have to keep that in the back of the mind. It's all worth it at the end when you can walk in and see kids with masks on that would rather be at school, rather risk different things because they know that they have the opportunity to be in your presence, right? Like to be a crew member means something. To be in Mr. Ehrman's class and to be 3D printing bag tags that get sent across the district, which I don't know if we've even talked about, but I mean, there are reasons why Educator of the Year awards, there are reasons why in this conversation, you guys have the accolades you do because you never lost sight of the kids at the forefront.
And all the the whole like this year. So I'm in this position until the end of January. And when I started out, I thought, okay, they're mine. Like if you're a crew member for a day, you're a crew member for life. So we're doing this all out. So we went about it. You know, I talked to them on the first day. I have a video from from a young lady named Charlotte who made a video for me that I shared with the class, and it was about being a crew member, and you know that sort of a deal. And I try to sell that, like, hey, this is a big deal. Well, a couple of weeks in, students were allowed to come back to in person, you know, so we had in person, and so I'm standing there and I'm greeting the kids as they're coming in, and our reading specialist, Mrs. Ramirez, she comes in and she goes, Mr. Creed, you gotta. I had to walk him down the hall, and I said, okay, and I said, hi James, how are you? And she said, do you see what he has on? I go, what? And he's wearing a custom Creed's Crew face mask that his grandmother has an embroidery machine. It's got our logo. It says Creed's Crew under it, and on the side it says member, because he's a member. He's a crew member, and he hands me one, and on it says Mr. Creed, and I lost it. Like I'm crying with this kid on the first day of meeting him in person, and I said to Mrs. Ramirez, who's a friend of mine, I said, "Wait, what happened?" She goes, "Well, he was walking up to me, and as soon as I saw him, I went, oh, well, I know who you are." And she walked him right down to the class that he needed to go in. And the kids, she said, I've had 3 kids tell me I'm a crew member. And they walked past me because they knew where they were going. She goes, I couldn't pass this one up. I had to keep walking with him. And I had never met the kid, like physically in person. And that whole idea, like you guys were talking about the planning, so that way when you do have to do different things, life gets a little bit easier. And that kind of a deal goes on, and you go, oh, wow. So those 4 weeks that we spent doing online learning and talking and not doing curriculum, because that doesn't matter. I want to know how the kids are doing. How are you feeling? What's going on? Are you safe at home? That turned into that kid walking in with that face mask that said Creed's Crew on it. And when I tell the kids, I have 2 jobs, what are they? And they all will say, are to teach us and to protect us. And I go, that's right, let's go. And I will do that every day. And so when these things come up, like we were added another week of virtual. It was added to us on Thursday. I was like, look, guys, what are my 2 jobs? And they recited it. And I said, yep. I said, we're going to be virtual next week because that's what's going to help protect you. So we're going to do that. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy. I don't believe in the word easy. Let's not do that. And so let's go. And we started out the week with, okay, hey, we're back. This is what we're doing. It's so great to see you guys. Here we are. And so when it comes to those different things and that whole idea, that whole mentality, that again is that the work you're doing in the beginning and all of that stuff, it's totally worth it to have that kid come walking in with a, that smile underneath of his mask on his face and to be able to see that and go, wow, okay, I got it. That does light a fire underneath you.
Just 15 minutes ago, I said I didn't know really what it meant to be a crew member, and I'm going to repeat myself again. I really didn't understand everything that went into being a Creed's crew member. And it's just incredible when you see it now that you're putting it back into action, and the way that it has spanned that gap of time where there were no new crew members, and the way your kids were able to embrace it starting in a virtual environment just really speaks to the way you've just established that with your class. So I could talk about this for hours, and I'm sure our audience could listen about this for hours, but I do want to transition into what will hopefully be a regular part of this show. Again, you being our first guest, we're still learning here. I would a lot of times introduce things into my classroom and say to the kids, I'm going to try this project. I thought of it at 3:00 in the morning, and it's either going to be awesome and I'm going to do it every year after this, or it's going to be a total disaster and no one will ever know it existed after this year. And I'll also say, you're doing some of those projects that I tested and I didn't know how well they would go or not. So we're going to do a little bit of like a lesson deep dive. I thought of maybe like a lesson lens look, but I still got to work on my branding of what we're trying to do here. So Matt and I are just going to ask you some standard questions, and we are going to just kind of walk through a specific lesson that you have in mind. So I'm going to kick things off, and I want to know, is it a single lesson that you're going to talk to us about, or is it more of like a unit long-term project?
So it's definitely a long-term thing. This is a long-term activity. And on that, this was something that when I interviewed those crew members, when I was looking to get the coaching position at another district, I asked the question. I said, what was your favorite lesson? What was the favorite thing that we did? And so this is right from crew members. And it's you guys don't know it. It's a 50 states tour. So it was a 50 states tour that I developed with help from the crew, and because they should make the content as well. And so it was an idea that came because we had to teach social studies, and they said, hey, we usually learn about areas. I said, okay, well, that's really vague, and I don't want to do that. So I looked at it and I said, they were like, oh, well, around the holidays, we teach about this one and that one. I said, okay, well, that's fine too. And I don't want to do that. So, because look, we teach social studies, but we teach the elementary version usually. We all lie about what Columbus did and all that stuff anyway. So I decided, let's not do that. Let's be more honest. Let's go on a road trip. And so what I designed was a road trip.
This is already off to a terrible start. You've answered like 4 of our questions. We only asked one.
I know. You guys had it. I know what you guys were thinking, and
you're ruining this run.
So it was a road trip, and I told the students, I said, look, I've been in cars before with people that can't carry conversations because they have nothing to talk about. So let's make it where if you cross a state line, you can think of some things. some interesting things about that state. Nobody cares what the state bird is. Nobody cares. Well, I thought when growing up that the state bird only lived in that state. That's the only place you could find that bird was in that state, and that you would like hit them with your car. There were that many of them, or like everywhere you looked, that was the state flower was that thing. Which, by the way, for Pennsylvania, it's the rough grouse and the mountain laurel. But anyway, so I said,
I'm going to try to salvage this. Could you tell us what were the objectives of this project?
Oh, the objectives of the lessons were to make the students more interested in the boring people that I've sat in the car with. To learn about cultures and to learn about parts of the United States.
In this situation, so what is you're using that bicycle analogy, right? This metaphor for your class. What are the kids actively doing in this opportunity? You're doing a great job of giving background, but what does that formulate as the kids' end? And obviously, are they in that driver's seat, or what's going on?
So first off, it was a series of just interesting questions that they had to go and research about the state. So I went in order of statehood. So I started with Delaware, which is where I'm from. So I decided, okay, we're going to do it this way. So we started out, we went through who passed away on some random corner in Wilmington years and years ago. Just interesting stuff that when you get there, you go, hey, do you know they have a pumpkin chunking contest here every year? And, those types of things. Just general basic information. I did ask them the capital just because, I don't know, you're supposed to know capital. So I put that in there. So they had that. After that, they then went on a virtual field trip to that state. Now, the virtual field trip was them having to plan that trip. So they had to decide which one of a couple of different field trips they went on. I designed them. I went through websites and I designed it. So like in Delaware, they could go to a University of Delaware sporting event. They had to look up the ticket price. They had to pick out which event they wanted to go to. They had to figure out what they wanted to do. They were adults at this point. The other one was like they got to go to an amusement park down on the boardwalk in Delaware. And they had to figure out the math for tickets. If they want to ride this many rides, how many tickets were they going to need? What was that going to cost them? Who were they going to go with? And then they had to go and they had to take that and they had to write a narrative about it, a fictional narrative about their trip to Delaware. And they couldn't just start with, so I got it to Delaware. They had to come up with a background. So it was like, oh, I won this trip around the country. And we started out in Delaware. And I took these people with me. Here's how old they are. And the reason you need age is because my kids found coupon codes. Not even going to lie. They found coupon codes to some of these events that, hey, if I'm going to take my brother, he's only 3. You don't have to pay until the kid's 5. So they would start doing that. And they would go on Groupon. They would go on all these different things to find discounted tickets as second graders. And then they had to go, and I gave them backgrounds, and they had to Photoshop themselves into pictures at these locations and give facts about where they were. So here I am at Pumpkin Chunkin. Did you know that they can launch a pumpkin however many 100 feet? And there they are smiling. Or I had a kid, Miles, who looked like he was getting blasted out of the cannon. Like that's what he went for. And so they had to go at their own pace throughout the states as far as they went. We never made it past like state 23.
All right, so we're starting to get this thing back on track, and we're getting a good picture of what the students are doing, really actively learning. I love how they're taking control of what's going on in the project. I love the authenticity and the real world problem solving. What was your role during the active learning of the students to ensure the success of the project?
So interesting you say that. I got observed during this lesson one time because the principal said, I want to observe one of your lessons. Which one should I come to? And I said, hey, come to the states tour. I said, but come early because there's a song that we play beforehand just to kick it off. And it's a 50 State song. It's a really cool little rap song that goes along with it. And she said, okay, fine, I'll show up. So we did the observation, and her and I sat next to each other throughout the entire observation. And we talked during the observation. I didn't teach during the observation. And it was probably my highest observation that I've ever gotten as far as my rating went. And it was funny. She actually said, I have to go home. She goes, this is going to take me a couple days to write this one up. And I go, okay. She goes, because you didn't teach, but I can tell that you've taught everything. And I was like, okay. So she went home. Her husband was a principal too. So they kind of went back and forth and talked about how they were going to write this thing up. And so what I was doing during that time was, first off, I was making sure that the wheels didn't fall off the bike, because we talked earlier about the difference between the iPads and things like that. Well, when you look at a website on a PC and then you gave it to an iPad in the early stages, they were two completely different things. And so that was kind of one of those deals where it's like, I gotta fix this website, or I gotta send you a new link. And then the other thing was, I was around asking those more in-depth questions. I was doing more writing activities with them as far as that goes, and sitting down with them and going, hey, you've used the word and then, and then, and then for every new sentence. How can we change that? Or what did you learn about this state? I've never been there, because we got into states I've never been to. Some states are super boring. It's really hard to find stuff that's like, wow, this is fun for a second grader. And I didn't want to send them to museums all the time and things like that. So it was a little different. But they had to plan it. And I said, how much did you spend at this place? How do you know you spent that much? Why did you spend that much? And they were so excited to show me those Groupon codes and all this stuff. They're going, it expires tomorrow. I'm like, you guys know we're not going on this trip, right? Like, we're not.
Creed, are your kids swiping your credit card while you're there?
Yeah. Oh, I always told them, it was funny.
I guess they were learning about like the CVC code on the back.
Yeah, they knew if they got to where it said enter credit card information that they had to stop. So they would get that far into some websites, because then we started, like, some kids wanted to know about sales tax, because different states have different sales tax. Like, all these different things started happening in these conversations. But honestly, I taught more in the very beginning was, hey, this is how this thing's going to navigate. Okay, you ready? And I would just hit the start of this song. It would be in the middle of them doing indoor recess, and I would hit start. And as soon as it would start, everything would disappear. They would break into groups. And what I found interesting too was they would change groups from time to time, because they liked working with some kids for some activities, like the writing part. They wanted to have their little writing clique. But then when it was picture time, they had a different group of kids, and it was like an amoeba, like moving all over the classroom. And I was just like, ooh. So yeah, with the whole, what was I doing? I was going on a road trip with my second graders. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, and I think that, like, if we were to pause at this point, right? Like, Ken, I know you and I will get into this, but what you're hearing right now, if you are listening, is learning that is what we'd almost call passive, right? Passive learning. They are receiving information without recognizing that they're receiving information. And that information is so much deeper. And realistically, what it comes down to is a theme. You taught ELA through writing and reading, math, science, social studies, music, potentially art, I'm sure there's an element of STEM, maybe even phys ed. You have what is deemed a well-rounded instructional activity that probably didn't fit between bell schedules, right? And that is where the most successful learning happens. And the hardest part is that's where the least amount of control comes in from the teacher's end.
And Matt, that's great teaching. It's really effective lesson planning. Mike put in a lot of planning time before and set the students up for success, but let go of control. Just like now we've referenced many times that analogy he provided us, getting the bike going and letting go of the handlebars. And, not only that, but Mike is proving, and our audience will learn this, that he is much better at creating analogies than Matt.
So the last question we'd have to ask is, right, so you are obviously moving into a realm where you could possibly do this again. I don't know if you're currently doing this again, but you have had some time to process what went really well and some things you'd like to change. What would you give yourself as advice or others advice to try an activity like this going into it to do it again?
So for this, and honestly, this goes to all of the teaching. My principal had come in and observed me once, and it was for a math lesson. And she sat down after the observation. She said, "How do you think it went?" I said, "I thought it went pretty well." She goes, "Yeah, you're very good at doing second grade math." I said, "Okay," and she goes, "I'm not impressed." She goes, "The students are the ones that need to know how to do second grade math. I watched you do second grade math." And I went, "Oh, okay." And honestly, part of that turned into, I need to stop teaching. I need to stop talking. I need to let the students do this. I need to be okay with being vulnerable. I need to be okay with things not working. I need to be okay with trying something and saying, I don't know, guys, let's go for it. And so with a lesson like the States, it turned into, I'm not talking. And you were talking about the passive learning. I had a student email me then that following summer after he was in my class. He was a crew member. He was retired at that point, and the parent emailed me and said they went on a trip to Kentucky and they had to go and look at a lake because apparently there's a monster at the bottom of a lake that he learned about in the 50 States tour. So they just went to some random lake and they went looking for the lake monster, even though it wasn't the right lake or whatever. And so when it comes to that, it's not about me and my learning. I'm a 38-year-old guy. Nobody's impressed that I can do second grade math. Nobody's impressed that I know the capitals. I'm an adult. The idea is that the students are who needs to show that they know what they're doing and that the learning has happened. And that honestly is where all of that comes from. And that whole idea of taking the hands off the handlebars and doing it that way is, no, it's not me. The students need to show that they understand.
What I really like about that reflection and that advice is it really is tough to get into that state of teaching. And, it definitely comes with time and experience and confidence. And a question I will typically get with our upper elementary grade level teachers and especially secondary teachers is if I'm going to let them figure it out more in class and I'm going to do less teaching, it's going to take longer. It's going to take too much time. I'm going to fall behind on pacing. And when I started doing that in my own classroom, I found that the first, maybe about marking period, maybe a little bit less, I was behind my grade level partners. And without making efforts to speed up, by the time we hit January, February, we were back even. And typically by about April, I was usually further ahead. And the reason I believe that happened was I was building foundational learning skills in my classroom. I was building grit, resilience, and their ability to figure things out and to learn on their own. And then it allowed them to actually not only learn at a deeper level, understand the content at a deeper level, but tackle new tasks and new learning at a quicker pace as well. And so I truly believe that you have to let go. You have to have the confidence to do it and trust the process. Trust that it's going to work out as you move through the curriculum and as you move through the year, and know that your students will have a much, much better understanding of the content that you're teaching. So I want to transition into what will hopefully be another segment that we close our shows with, and we're going to call this our exit ticket. So the first question is, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
Well, like I talked about earlier, know that you are the answer to their trivia question. That you are the one that, for the rest of their life, you have that opportunity. And I know they say you only get one first impression. I get that, but tomorrow's not a bad day to start being that person, that awesome person that's in their life, or that person that they go, man, I remember I had this teacher. Mine was a driver's ed teacher. Okay, the guy wouldn't quit on me, and that's where he was my best teacher as far as that goes. And so to take that and say, okay, this guy believes in me. My parents obviously believed in me. All those different things, but to kind of say, no, I believe in you. Like, come on, dude, we got this. Who are you? Oh, and they'll say, I'm so and so, right? And what does that mean? Well, and you're a crew member. Crew members, we do tough things. We got this. Is it easy? And we get rid of the word easy. That's another thing in the classroom. Like we get rid of that word. And so no, we don't believe in that. Let's go. And so to take that and just to say, you're going to be the answer to that kid's trivia question for the rest of their life. Who did they have as such and such? You've got to understand that is huge, and they only get one of you. So make
And
it
let's be
make it
honest,
awesome.
it cost you $11 in stickers, right?
Right,
Like it
right,
wasn't it
right.
wasn't a
It was,
material
yeah, it
thing.
was a goofy brand, and it was a hey, would you guys like stickers of this? Yeah, we want stickers, and it turned into cool. And then as the years went on, and kids are going, oh, that's I'm one of them. There you are. That means that you have to do it a little different. And I not to go away, but I had a student that got in trouble one time on the bus. He was a crew member. This was 2 years after he was in my class. It was a new principal in the building. She had only been working there with us for a month or two, and the kid got in trouble. And I saw him in the office. I said, "Hey, what did he do?" She goes, "Oh, he got in trouble on the bus." I said, "He's a crew member." And she said, "Well, okay." I said, "When you go in there," I said, say right to him, "I just found out that you're a crew member." And so she kind of led with that. The kid burst into tears that he had let down that that honor that you have of that, like, oh, and he did. He burst into tears, and she came out and she goes, "Holy cow! Yeah, how many years did you have him?" I said, "One." I said, "I had him for 180 days. He's in there bawling his eyes out. He doesn't want me to tell you that he's in there." I go, "Yeah, it's a thing." And so by doing that, yeah, it's a goofy sticker, it's a goofy name, but it carries that they carry that with them.
And for many, many years, long past you and I being the three of us doing what we're doing, right? I think so. Obviously, you've had bumps along the way, but also some great advice. So, what if you were to, I know, on the top of your head, think of whether it's a colleague, supervisor, even just a student, what would you consider to go in and do your job better tomorrow? What was something that kind of resonates through your head as that advice that you always go back to, or just generally the best advice you've gotten to push it to the next level?
I sort of mentioned it earlier, but it was the no one's impressed that you can do second grade math. And honestly, that's where I go to even now. I caught myself today teaching second grade math. We were doing a double digit subtraction problem that needed regrouping and all these different things. And I caught myself showing off my ability. And I looked at all the faces, they're all on their computer screen. I'm doing this, and I'm going, and then you do, and I put the line through the tens place to regroup it, to put it over. And I went, wait, nope. And I just paused right there. I was like, all right, guys, I want everybody to jump into a flip grid and make this. Tell me what goes next. And I just paused right there because I realized I'm doing what I told myself to not do. And so I caught myself, and it was, yeah, stop. No, you're in this position because you're good at that topic or that skill or whatever it might be. No one's impressed at this point that you can do it. The kids in front of you do it. That's really cool. Wow, you did a nice job teaching them how to do that, not just to listen to you solve the problem over and over again. So that
And I just got to say, hats off to your principal for saying that, because she was observing a lesson that was incredibly student centered, and she found a way to push you to be even more focused on the learners. And not only that, but what you were doing was incredible. And a lot of times administrators might just say, "Wow, that was amazing," and not give you any constructive feedback. And so I really want to applaud that supervisor for pushing you that next level, for you to become even better of a teacher than you were before. So the last question we're going to ask you in the exit ticket is, we know how the school year goes in waves. There are those days where, it's just a big struggle. We're just trying to survive. And when you're in that moment, what is something that every educator needs to hear to power up beyond that moment of struggle?
so so I am also a tough mudder. I've done 10 tough mudders, which, if you don't know what they are the insane obstacle courses that have all sorts of different things. And there are times when, and I usually run them with a friend of mine, and I've had to pick her up and carry her. There's times when she's had to carry me. There's times when I've gone, man, this is the worst thing I've ever done. You know what? I still sign up for it next year. And there are times when I go, man, that step hurts. The next one's not going to. It's okay. And I would take that step and I go, man, that one hurt too. But the next one's not going to. It's okay. And the only way that you get through a 50-mile obstacle course is, I know it sounds hokey, but by taking that step. The only way to get your students to where you want them to be is to take that step and to say, okay, hey, you know what? That activity sucked. Like I've put out activities that, dear, they're awful. And I've done it and I've gone, wow, that was really bad. Well, let's figure out the next one. Good, it failed. But you know what? We learned how to do this. Okay, let's go. Good. We're struggling through this. That's a good struggle. That's where the muscles get built. That's where I'm signing up for next year's Tough Mudder. I'm signing up to hopefully teach again next year, in a classroom, because is it awful right now? Yeah, it's awful. I got kids I watched a kid today hit his sister with a book as she was walking by. I'm hearing curse words in the background from people. I'm seeing all this stuff. I'm seeing kids with their cameras off all day that aren't answering when I'm calling their name. You know what? This is not fun. But the next step isn't going to be as bad. The next one's not going to hurt because we did so much to make tomorrow's step that much lighter. And when we talked about the setup as early days of the school year, going through and trying to teach kids how to change the font on a Google slide as a second grader and they don't know how to share their screen and they've managed to mute themselves and turn off their screens 3 times. Yeah, it is slam your head on the desk awful. And you know what though? Today I had students creating things in Scratch and going through and coding what they're doing and saying, hey, Mr. Creed, watch this. When you touch the A key, it does this. And then if you wait 2 seconds and you touch the B key, it's going to talk back to them. Okay, great job, 7-year-old. That's awesome. Wow. All right. And then you go over to the next kid and they're doing it in Google Slides. They're doing something different. They're doing all this things. Yeah, it sucks sometimes. And those first couple of days, those early on days, yeah, they're awful. But if I don't sit there and say there's a goal at the end of this, I get a headband at the end of my Tough Mudder. I get another group of students next year to say, wow, that's awesome. Watch what we can do. And we're blasting rockets off to Mars by the end of the year. That's great. So, yeah, keep pushing, keep going. Is it awful? Yeah. And you know what? Ask for help. You know what? Tell somebody that you're not doing well. Tell somebody that, hey, this is really hard. Cry. Okay, I've held back twice already on this podcast. Like, it's okay. All right, go for it. But just know that there's someone out there that loves you that's willing to help you. There's somebody in your class next door that's willing to help you. And there's no part of that is being weak. There's no part of when I'm in the mile 13 of a Tough Mudder to go, man, I got to stop and catch my breath. Yeah, I do. And you know what? I'm going to take another step after that. And that person next to me, we start together, we finish together. So yeah, we're gonna make it through it. It's gonna be all right. But yeah, it's gonna be tough sometimes. You're gonna get muddy. It's not gonna be fun. It's all right. We got tomorrow. The next step isn't gonna hurt. The last one did.
Before you let him go, we have to plug one thing that I thought he was going to bring up in our earlier session. If you do not know or have not seen Creed present, he presents on a bunch of different topics, but you have seen him work hard even in this interview. If you want to get your socks blown off, you have to check on Creed. You'll have to share this if you're willing, but he has gone through with his expertise of taking literary classics and pairing them with hands-on activities with multiple options, that it is something that when you talk about STEM, when you talk about STEAM, when you talk about student-centered learning, when you talk about these items, at least in my opinion, Creed, I think that you've done the hard part that everyone's been too scared to do, right? You've bridged that gap between science, math, hands-on learning, engineering, and literacy, and made it in a way that every single kid, whether it's a high school kid or a kindergarten, has heard these stories and can participate in the activities. So if you're willing to share
Yeah. So, Mike, why don't you tell our audience where they can connect with you? Where can they learn more about you? Social media, websites, that kind of stuff for us.
Come on over to the farm. No, so my Twitter handle is Creeds, Creeds underscore crew. So Creeds underscore crew. Because when I started, it was just Creeds crew. And if you don't read it correctly, it says Creed Screw, and you get a very different group of followers when you have that as your Twitter handle. So it's Creeds, Creeds underscore crew on Twitter. I do not have Instagram. I do not have Facebook. I do not. I'll make sure that you guys have my STEM links. But I am Creeds underscore crew on Twitter. That is it. And when you see that, that is I carry that name for the 94 crew members that are active and retired from active duty. With that's what I carry. So yeah, that's what that is.
Mike, thank you so much. This interview was just unbelievable. You blew away our expectations. I was really excited to sit down with you. And you know what? I'm gonna just go on the record now and say you have earned being our first guest. So we won't be seeing your stockings in June. I want to thank everybody for listening and watching today. If you haven't already, please go to poweredup.com to become a free member today and start engaging in our forums, connecting with educators, connect with Mike, Matt, and myself, ask questions, and share content. Follow us on all our social media platforms at poweredup. And don't forget, if you're listening, we're available on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, we are available on anywhere that you can get your podcasts. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you're engaging with us. So we will also link all the notes from today, the website that Mike referenced, his STEM activities that Matt told us about, as well as his social media handles on our website. And you can find that out at poweredup.com/show2. That's poweredup.com/show2. So, Mike, thanks again. This was unbelievable. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
As we get ready to power down, hopefully we leave you feeling powered up. We'll get after this next time, and can't wait to talk to you guys soon.